Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week I dive back into a little bit of old history, not quite as far as, say, something like Last Exile, which I've been watching recently, but something that I was a fan of when it first debuted, and one that has kind of just stood up as a good comedy that has stayed pretty relevant for quite a while, and that is Black Butler. Now, the manga, I believe, debuted around 2006, 2007. They didn't start making anime episodes for it until a couple years later, and then the English version came out, I think, in 2011. And I watched the first season. The interesting thing about this is a lot of the stuff is manga only. So forgive me if my knowledge base is going to be limited. I'm going to be discussing, obviously, the first 26 episodes, and then the subsequent seasons after that. One of the main issues I find, especially when adapting something that's been so long running, is that unless they've been constantly at it and you're constantly watching it, you do lose a little bit of it after a while. Now, thankfully, I was able to watch this fairly recently, and I have it kind of in my head. What I did not know was they're actually making another season in 2024. I forget if that's an actual OVA, because I've done a couple of those, or if it's an actual season. So, this thing just keeps on going. But it's good in a sense because there is a lot of things you can do with the concept, because it's both very straightforward, but it's also fairly vague in the sense that the setup can be whatever they want it to be, provided the thing is popular. And given that it is a comedy, Black Butler can avoid kind of the trappings of having a story that you have to follow, so it can stay kind of episodic in its own way, provided that the characters remain halfway interesting, which really is the draw of the show, is the setting and the characters. So, who are these characters? Well, Seal Phantom Hive, voiced by Brina Palencia, has this issue where he is a heir to a great legacy. His parents died in some weird fire, I believe. And again, the story kind of shoots back and forth. It's one of those, like, Spider-Man movie kinds of things where they keep trying to give you different little nuggets of information, kind of like Batman origin story, where it's the same setup, but who's following it and who's doing it ends up becoming more convoluted as things go. But for all intents and purposes, someone caused a fire and people died, and now CL has revenge on his mind. That's a pretty dark motivation, especially for a comedy. So that's really what's holding things together. He's not a smarmy wise ass. He's there to get shit done. He is basically young Bruce Wayne, if he was English and annoying. But Brina plays him well, and the way he goes about this is he makes a bargain with a demon of some description, known later as Sebastian, voiced by J. Michael Tatum. So this is like the second or third time I've had a show led by Palencia and Tatum, which is just like, oh, that's really funny. It's almost like when Steve Bloom and Wendy Lee were almost in everything at the same time, almost always opposite each other in the episodes. Weird coincidences. I don't know if they ever planned that. I don't think they do. It just ends up happening. But anyway, Sebastian is one hell of Butler. Nobody says how he can do it. He just does it. So because he's demonic and insanely good at everything, he's also the best looking person in the world. He's the most dashing person in the world. He has the most skill in the world and can do anything, essentially. And that's the crux of the show, is he leads the CL Phantom Hive Manor along with some bumbling idiots as comic relief. And they just go about their business doing things in Victorian London under the auspices of being known as the Queen's Watchdog. So CL doesn't really have a lot of skill himself. This is pre Batman Bruce Wayne. He has like limited, if at all, skill sets. He has a lot of like... The thing about CL, though, is even though Sebastian is the one doing all of the heavy lifting, he still has like a mind for this sort of thing, this kind of pseudo-detective work. Whatever they need him to do, whether it comes helping Scotland Yard or finding kidnapped children or some other weird bullshit, he's always able to kind of think through, and he has enough contacts available in many different spheres that he knows how to find things so that when Sebastian needs to get shit done, he does. I still remember, like, the first episode, he tricks this dude, I want to say, into burning himself alive, if I remember correctly. It wasn't, like, a major plot point, but it's, like, it's just, okay. So even though we're doing this as a comedy, we're showing CL has no qualms about getting rid of people. That's good. I like that. Because a lot of this show does revolve around silly shit most of the time. But when it needs to, it can pull its socks up and just be like, nah, we're not messing around here. And that kind of balance is what makes it work. I talked way back when about a show named Emma, a Victorian Romance. And that show was more of a straight-laced drama romance. The backdrop and the setting was not fantastical in nature. It went into comedy sometimes, but it was just, here is a different setting, here is some people trying to fall in love, and then it's the class angle. This is a similar setting of Victorian London of some description. I mean, a lot of it does feel kind of interesting because it still has an Indian sidekick of thing. It does remind me of Emma in a more comedic way. It just has that supernatural bend to it of crazy characters doing crazy things, and guns and violence and shit. But it is played for laughs. So a lot of this stuff, until way late in seasons, only has so much stakes involved. Because you do have your traditional jokey episodes here and there. Oh, it's Christmas time. Go get somebody a gift. Do this thing. Learn about this thing. Have a cooking contest. Stuff like that. So it spends a lot of its time faffing about, basically, doing jack all. But then it needs to rein itself in. It still does enough. And I think that comes in the form of the villains for each season and all of the stuff that's going on. The thread tugging at CL all the time is, who is the one who starts the fire? Who is the one that killed his parents? Who is the one that, even though there's a side character known as Lizzie who shows up here and there, she's somewhat annoying here and there as CL's fiance of sorts. She has some agency in the plot. She sometimes gets kidnapped or gets in trouble or whatever, and CL is nice enough to save her, even though he quote unquote can't stand her and shit like that. So it's the character dynamics. There's a dynamic between Agni, who is this sort of proper yet still brutish Indian character who is being led by this like ne'er-do-well Prince Soma. Somehow, someway, he has power to handle Sebastian in a fist fight, but they end up becoming not friends but allies in a way because they're different people. Sebastian comes across as just, I'm above it all, and I know I'm better than you, and I'm just fucking with you. Because Sebastian's whole thing is he is a demon of weird description. Kind of like, I don't know, like a smug Elias from Magus Bride or something. His power set is so absolutely ridiculous that nothing can really harm him. A smug Alucard would make a better explanation, because Alucard has never been defined as like a thing. He just exists as this like end all be all thing. That's what Sebastian is in a comedy sense, because that's the relationship they have. It's the same as Integra and Alucard. So it's like, I'm here to do everything I can to get your revenge, and then once that's happened, I will take your soul. Because the show keeps moving and moving and moving and moving, that doesn't exactly always happen. So when the first season ends, you get this crazy weird thing where a second season happens, and then a set of different characters, and these kind of, I would say, mirror images of Sebastian and CL, known as Alois and Claude. They're voiced by Lucy Christian and Jason Douglas, respectively, and they go about things way differently. Alois is a bit of an insane guy who does very evil things to his maid. Let me just say that up front without spoiling things too much. So, yeah, that's pretty mug. And Claude, his name is Faustus. Really on the nose there. So yeah. And Douglas obviously plays him with this kind of sophisticated bitch face, or bitch voice. That's the best way I would describe it. The sort of eviler version of Sebastian. Joy. That season only lasts about 12 episodes, but you go into that territory of how much story are you willing to invest, because you still need to kind of maintain who are you building in the first episodes to keep going to the next ones. And then there's another season that goes by known as the Book of Circus. There was another thing called Book of Murder in Atlantic, but they were either movies or OVA. But the Book of Circus was about 10 to 12 episodes. They investigate a circus where kids are either going missing or stuff is being stolen. A lot of weird things going on. And they have to investigate what is going on in this circus full of orphaned children who have these different power sets. They happen upon different characters, and it's the typical circus folk. You have your trapeze artist, you have your phone going off when I'm trying to record. You have all sorts of things. You have fire breathers, you have lion tamers, the works. But the interesting thing is they're being led by a person of ill repute who has how would I describe it? Oh God, trying to read this back again after having watched it, I'm trying to skirt around it. Unhealthy obsession with children. Leave that where it is. I believe that's where it is. He becomes fascinated with certain children, and I don't know if it goes that far. I don't know if the show wants to go that far, but it's not good, whatever it was. And yes, so every season you have these interesting villains and setups and things. I think for me, what really works is the dynamics at play between characters. And I said CL and Sebastian mostly because they are the main characters. But you do have more interesting characters here and there that will show up. You have Grell Sutcliffe, who, unbeknownst to me, because the anime never mentions it, is actually a trans woman, apparently. It's never brought up in the anime for whatever reason or another. I guess the manga mentions it. I never heard of it, but apparently that is the thing. He's voiced by a dude, and he wears men's clothing, you would just assume. And again, assumptions are bad, but how would I have known? But anyway, Grell has a crazy obsession with Sebastian, always calling me, "Ooh, Bassy!" Stuff like that. But he kills things. He is a Grim Reaper. The concept with him is he has a chainsaw, or other people have like these pruning shears or these crazy gardening tools. They kill people at the ends of their lives, and then they read back what is known as their cinematic record to figure out what they've lived with and, their sorts of traumas and things. And Grell is, again, played for laughs, but you get this kind of like goofy, jokerish character out of it because it's a bit uncomfortable after a while. And then it just kind of filters into, okay, he's just there. And that's fine because Grell is interesting. But then you have a different character known as Lao and Ran Mao, who are always together. Lao is this, like, I want to say Chinese triad kind of guy. Maybe he's from Hong Kong. He's the typical, like, and you've always seen this, the dudes who never open their eyes. They're the mischievous, annoying people who are always kind of laughing at you inside, making snide comments. And then eventually, like, one time per show, and I've seen this with, like, Love Hina and then, like, 3 or 4 other shows maybe, but it is a trope. They keep their eyes closed the whole time, and then when they need to, they'll open their eyes. How does that work as a mechanic? I don't know. I'm sure it's some Japanese culture thing. But basically, Lao is a contact for CL to, get information from because he's a criminal underworld mastermind. It's perfect. And he's played by Jerry Jewell, who is Jimmy Kudo, or the narrator from Case Closed back when they dubbed it. I wish they still did, but what have you. Maybe they still do. It's been forever. But anyway, he's played again with just this charisma about him because he's above it all. He's got this. He's well-to-do, and unlike Prince Soma and Agni, he can actually handle himself in a fight in most cases. But then he has Ran Mao, who doesn't speak mostly, doing all the dirty work, but also hanging off him like a trophy of sorts. It's very awkward, but they look fancy doing it. But Lao is there as yet another contact, and again, they mess around with the character dynamics because the people you don't expect to have backstories will be given time to flesh out their backstories, especially kind of the main 4 characters on the household. You got Baldroy, Finney, Mayrin, and Tanaka. They don't do much. And Black Butler goes for the comedic thing where everything is the same look, and then when they want to be very comedic, they super deform it and they look like plastic cutouts, that kind of thing. They end up being played really goofy. And then, like, 1 or 2 episodes, you get this really, really serious look at who they actually are, and it's actually fun to learn about them because they don't give you anything until then, but they're just there to be funny or there to be browbeaten by Sebastian because they're idiots, basically. But it is still good because at heart, and this is why this show works, is that it's not trying to be a comedy that suddenly switches to being a drama, like some things that sort of fail for me. Devil as a part-timer is a good example. I think it's trying way too hard to be too meta for its own good to try and be serious because it's spent all its time being stupid, that when it's trying to add lore, it's not working. I think Black Butler succeeds because it adds enough lore without forgetting it's supposed to be sort of a dark gothic comedy, because nothing ever comes across as unbelievable. Everything fits. There's demons at play, there's underworld criminal activity, there's a person seeking revenge everywhere, there's devils and demons and witches and undertakers and grim reapers, and all that stuff makes sense because they built the world to be comedic enough that everything's supposed to be funny, but then dramatic enough that, oh, okay, when it has to actually try hard, you actually care about the characters. And that's something that a lot of comedies can fail at, is having enough of a balance to where the serious stuff actually fits. And Black Butler is able to succeed being both. Because sometimes you just veer into drama and you stay there. Sometimes you veer into comedy too much and you can't go back. This skirts the line where you're not going to mistake this for a drama. But the allure of the dark shit fits in the scenes where, okay, I can buy that this guy gets burned alive and turned into a pie. I can buy that this guy gets stabbed and he's seeing all this stuff flash before his eyes. I can buy that these demons are running around making weird ass fucking deals with like other serial killers and shit, because that's how they've designed the show. Nothing seems off limits, but nothing seems out of place either. And that's a weird balance that has to be maintained for it to work. Now, would I want all of this for like hundreds of episodes? God, no. And I'm grateful that Black Butler has kind of avoided that trap. Sure, the manga has way more stuff in it. Like I said, the Grell stuff I would have never picked up on because the anime never explains it. There are a lot of characters the anime's never really touched before. So I would say that the manga, again, far be it for me to say this, the manga probably just has more stuff in it. And so they're only adapting as much as they can. But I still feel that the anime adaptations do enough. This isn't like trying to minimize the anime. It's still good. I think that first 26 episodes is really good. And again, I think the other couple of mini seasons, you know, the Alois stuff and the Book of Circus are viable enough that, you know, Black Butler still holds up, you know, after a decade. And I'm glad that I watched it, and I'm glad that, like, they're still going to bring it back. And if I ever do get around to reading the manga version someday, maybe I'll fill in some of the gaps of the things that I was missing. But either way, you're in for an interesting treat if you haven't watched it. Would I recommend Black Butler? Absolutely. Because it's one hell of a show. And what kind of host would I be if I didn't recommend a good show? Of course I had to pull the Sebastian. Why wouldn't I? Anyway, that'll do it for me. This one hopefully went by a little quick. But that's fine. I'm good when things aren't always like, when things are cut and dry and I can go through them kind of quickly. That's totally fine. Anyway, what is up? What is going on? Well, after this, it will be Master Detective Archives Rain Code, The Helpful Fox Senko-san, Breath of Fire 2, Rumbling Heart, and Donkey Kong Country 2. So I'm keeping busy doing all sorts of fun junk. So I will see you guys next time. Citizen Strife, signing off.